Good evening. I want to reconvene the December 5th, 2017 meeting of the Brattleboro Selectboard. And we know the meeting has been properly warned because we came into executive session at 5:30. Would someone like to make a motion to approve the minutes of the November 21st meeting?
So moved.
We have a motion. Are there any comments about the minutes? Yes, sir.
Page 3, line 33, please delete, he supported a statewide ban.
Oh.
Thank you very much. Does anyone else have any comments or corrections to the minutes? All those in favor of approving the minutes of the November 21st meeting, please say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed? 5-0. The motion carries. Next up is chair's remarks. And the only thing I'll say is, just in case people didn't know, we had a meeting on Saturday. What was it? Ran from about 9 to 1, where we talked about the budget and we ran through all the expense line items for all the department heads. And I know it was on BCTV and it's taped, so if anybody missed it and you'd like to see it, you can watch it. And tonight we have on the agenda the fire truck, but at the end of the meeting we'll recap when our next meetings are and when we're talking about the budget. But it was a very good meeting, and keep moving forward. Town manager's comments.
I didn't think I had any, but if it's okay with you, actually, I'll recap the budget schedule now.
That would be great.
Just in case folks don't stay with us all the way through.
No, it gave them a reason to stay all the way through.
Yeah, a big teaser.
It's a cliffhanger.
The next budget meeting after tonight will be a special select board meeting just on budget issues. It'll be next Thursday rather than next Tuesday. Next Tuesday is the first night of Hanukkah. So we scheduled this to push it back to Thursday the 14th at 6:15 here in the select board meeting room. And the topic that evening will be several different ways in which the board has considered or in which the public has suggested that levels of service provided by the town be increased. So we'll have discussion of at least 2 possible staff positions, as well as a number of other initiatives that we might wish to undertake in the coming fiscal year. So this will be the moment. Actually, all year long, we've had different conversations where we've said, wow, that's a really great idea. We're going to have to kind of sort through the priorities and make some challenging decisions when it comes time for budget. And this will be the moment when we look at those opportunities and weigh those costs. So we'll have that on Thursday night, the 14th. And then during the regular select board meeting 2 weeks from tonight, on Tuesday, the 19th, is when we'll take stock of where we are. We've been at this now for a little over a month. We'll see where the changes that have been made in the budget since it was first proposed on November 1st leave us at this time, and frame the work that we need to do together in January related to any additional information that the board might want to see, and kind of listing so that and we know and the public knows what issues remain to be decided. The public is encouraged to attend those meetings and the January budget meetings, and to participate as you see fit, to provide your input to the select board before they make their final decisions.
Great, thank you. Does anyone on the select board have any comments or committee reports?
Yeah.
Oh, good, go ahead.
I attended a meeting of the Community Equity Collaborative's Diverse Workforce Recruitment Committee, which I think is the first structure to result from our conversations and Peter's report and the actions that were recommended as far as attracting qualified candidates for jobs in the area. And this is a community-wide collaborative, and it involves most of the major employers and school district and the town. And representatives from the College of St. Joseph were invited, which is a college that's been very successful at recruiting qualified students of color into their programs. And they have a very professional and comprehensive team that works on placement, finding internships, finding jobs, apprenticeships, career opportunities, and career exploration activities, and very professional. And they came, and Peter and Chief were there, and they had a lot of questions. They really were professionals. They were familiar with all the ins and outs of recruiting people and placing people and job development. And they had a lot of questions, and it seemed like Peter and the chief must have spent the whole day before anticipating and preparing, because they were so, and I know they didn't, but because they were so knowledgeable, they had so much information, they were so clear about the things that had to happen to facilitate these, to make this work for these students to come here and spend some time here and look around and explore our community. And it just struck me that they're already on the job. They're already doing it. They're doing things that we have no idea about, we don't hear about, but they really are focusing on doing this and doing it right. And one of the things that happens on the school board meetings a lot is that the principals talk about things that their staff are doing and how proud they are of them. And I don't typically say proud, because that's one of the things that you're not supposed to, it's a sin or something you're not supposed to feel. But I was really proud of Peter and the chief and how well they handled that, and the way they represented the town, and the very positive impact that came. We're going to get maybe a couple of dozen students in the springtime coming and fanning out around the community and exploring all aspects of it, not just what the jobs are, but what else goes on in the community and what life would be like if they lived here. So it was really very impressive second step down that path. Thanks.
Thank you.
Chief's not here, but I'm sure Mark will tell him his ears should be burning.
Does anyone else on the select board have any comments or committee reports? All right. Now it's time for public participation. And before I recognize anyone in the public, I want to first recognize, I think, is Justin here? We have a Human Rights Day proclamation, and I don't know if you want to come up to the microphone and just introduce yourself and talk about why you asked us to do the proclamation, and then I will read the whole thing, so you don't have to read it, I will. But we'll give you the opportunity.
Thank you very much. I think there's...
Why don't you introduce yourself?
So my name is Justin Beebe. I'm originally from Rhode Island. I came up to Brattleboro in 2013 as a student at SIT, and I now work for Youth Services here in Brattleboro, working with homeless youth and youth who are at risk of homelessness. So there's a lot I can say and a lot I want to say about the critical importance of human rights, but mostly I just want to take this time to thank you and thank the town manager for inviting me here tonight to speak and for considering my proclamation proposal and solidifying it here tonight. So thank you.
Great, thank you. And what I'm going to do is read the proclamation. I know the select board have it in front of them, but I know the public doesn't, so I'm going to read it. And it's,
There are copies here.
and I'm going to read it slowly because we have ASL interpreters, and I want to make sure that they can catch every word that we're saying. Human Rights Day Proclamation 2017, celebrating the UN Declaration of Human Rights. Whereas the United Nations was founded in 1945, and the anniversary of the day on which the UN General Assembly adopted the Universal Declaration of Human Rights in 1948 is observed each year on December 10th. And whereas Eleanor Roosevelt chaired the UN Human Rights Commission, which was charged with drafting the declaration, as well as championed UN ideals across the United Nations, as chair of the United Nations Association of the USA, and whereas the United Nations promotes peace and security, development, democracy, economic prosperity, global health, and human rights around the world, and is vital now more than ever, and whereas the United States has a long tradition of international leadership on human rights, and has shown bipartisan commitment to advancing human rights through ratification of the International Convention on Civil and Political Rights, Convention Against Torture, International Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Racial Discrimination, and pursuing membership on the UN Human Rights Council, and whereas a 2017 bipartisan poll revealed that more than 8 out of 10 voters say it is important that the United States remains an active role maintains an active role within the UN, and whereas the United Nations Association of the U.S. has strived to promote the, quote, Stand Up for Someone's Human Rights campaign of the Office of the UN High Commissioner for UN Human Rights, and whereas the United Nations Association of Vermont and the town of Brattleboro is committed to educating and mobilizing our local communities to build a stronger network of global citizens and leaders to create a more prosperous, safe, just, and sustainable world for all. And whereas we encourage the citizens of Brattleboro to participate in activities related to Human Rights Day and to strive to actualize a greater awareness of the importance of human rights. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Brattleboro Selectboard does hereby proclaim December 10th, 2017 as Human Rights Day. What I would ask is that we have a motion to adopt the proclamation so that we can take an official vote.
So moved.
We have a motion to adopt the proclamation that proclaims December 10th, 2017 Human Rights Day in Brattleboro. Before I do that, does anyone have any comments about that? Anyone in the public have any comments? All right, all those in favor of declaring December 10th, 2017 Human Rights Day in Brattleboro, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion carries 5-0, and December 10th will be Human Rights Day. Thanks, Justin. And we will get an official
There's a
autograph.
folder. There's a folder right there with it in there,
All right, so he can. This is one for Justin to take with him.
once it's signed.
Okay, we'll get you an autographed copy.
Thank you.
Now that I'll open up to formal public participation, is there anyone in, yes, I'm going to do my spiel while you're getting up. Is there anyone in the public who wants to talk about something that is not on tonight's agenda? Come on up.
Thank you. What a great segue, Justin. As some of you know, I belong to the anti-abortion group, which is a real diversity here in Brattleboro. And I have on my car an anti-abortion slogan or sign. Last Thursday, leaving the gym, I noticed this thing underneath my windshield well. And being the alarmist, I was on my way to the Toastmasters meeting. Being the alarmist that I am, I immediately looked at it and thought, oh, have we got a bomb here? Well, it's not a bomb. It's a Planned Parenthood condom. That was last Thursday. Today, I was at a fast food restaurant right on main Putney Road and enjoying my coffee. And a gentleman got up in front of me, left his table, went out to my truck. Somehow he had Scotch tape. He taped this little sign to my door of my truck. So I sipped my coffee and considered what I was going to do. So since it was raining, I better go out there and read it while it was still legible. It says, "I'll bet you're a man sexist." So I read this, and then he starts honking his car horn. He's situated down the parking lot at the end, baiting me. Now, there's no self-defense. It's a no-go, right, sir? Of course not. So I just ignored him. Didn't walk into the trap. But I was angry. So what I'm asking is that the people of Brattleboro and the police keep an eye on my car. It's very distinct. There's only one like it that I've seen since I've been up here, and that's mine. It's parked right on the edge of Putney Road almost every single day. My routine is like clockwork. And I say this because I'm afraid of the increasing feeling I get of lawlessness in this town. I think we're entirely too soft on crime or anything that verges on crime. I'm asking that we hold the line, protect my truck. I'm big and strong. I don't want to get baited into anything. I lift weight 3 hours a day. I can rip a man's head off if I have to. So I don't want to go there. So I'm asking that everyone give me a hand, observe the law, hold the line. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Nick.
Is there anyone else in the public who wants to talk about something that's not on tonight's agenda? Yes, sir.
Hello, I don't know if I'm on tonight's agenda. I did email. I'm Stuart Strothman from the Southeastern Vermont Watershed Alliance. And if I'm not on the agenda, I'll say a few words.
Yes,
Great, thank
please
you.
do.
So I'm the secretary of the Watershed Alliance, and we do water quality testing in town, have done for a very long time. And our budget is supplemented by the EPA. We have some funding from a variety of organizations and memberships, and then towns contribute to our organization and keep our fairly modest budget running. And coming in this year, it was pointed out at our annual meeting that while a lot of our water testing happens in Brattleboro, and I have some hard copy of just some reviews of testing results and then an overview of our history, and I've emailed some of this to, I think, many of you or all of you on the select board. So Brattleboro apparently stopped contributing in 2007, and we receive a number of contributions from a variety of other towns that are very important to us. And we wanted to request that Brattleboro add a line item to support our organization, which it hasn't done for a long time, and I have no idea why it stopped. So that goes back to well before my history, and I don't know that explanation. But I'm curious if you have questions, or if there could be some sort of a motion. I have a lot of information.
Yeah, this is not the appropriate time to make a motion on that. I think
Okay.
probably what we would do is ask that
Right.
you leave the information with the town manager,
Okay.
and
And we
We
will
can
address
look
it as
into
part
it.
of the potential increase in level of service discussion.
Right.
yeah.
Great.
Does that
Thank you
make
very
sense
much.
to you?
That's fine.
And if you want to, Jan is the person that
Okay,
knows
great.
all, so if you want to give her the information,
Yep, I have
and then we
6
can.
copies here.
Great. Yeah.
So,
That
and
would
it
be
gives a
helpful.
good solid overview of the service we provide and its value.
Yeah.
E. coli testing and phosphorus testing, fairly extensive on a lot of the rivers, and there's a lot of valuable knowledge we report to the EPA, and we coordinate with a number of other organizations that contribute water tests as well.
Great.
So,
Thank you.
thank you.
Yeah, it sort of predates all
Stuart,
of
one
us.
question. Every now and then, in the summertime, there's an article in the paper that gives the E. coli measurements for the swimming holes, mostly up the West
Right.
River. Is that your work?
Yeah, that comes
Great,
from
thank
us. That's correct. And there's a lot of interesting information specifically on the Whetstone and the West River that it would be good for you to know about.
Yeah. Great.
Great, thank you.
So
Thank you.
I'll just drop it as a-
Yep, that's great.
So we're going to try to get that on, for an agenda item, right?
It'll be together with the other potential increases in level of service.
Does it make sense to
Week from
everybody?
Thursday.
That sounds perfect.
Just as a point of information, I did find out that in the past it had been made outside of the Human Services Committee. I think it was added at town meeting, so maybe find out more about that
Right.
on the way to the meeting.
Right.
Can be-
Apparently, our vice president attended the Human Services meeting last year and had the impression that it wasn't seen as appropriate because it's a different sort of
Right.
service.
Yeah,
that
We'll figure it out.
coordinates with the federal government.
yeah.
So,
Does anyone else in the public have any comments or questions before we move on? Thank you very much.
thank you.
We have our regular update about the police fire facilities project.
Oh, this is coming to a close.
Indeed it is. So hopefully, unless we bump into a surprise here at the finish line, by the next time, Brandy just indicated we're not allowed to have that. By the next time we come together for a regular meeting on the 19th, we should have reached substantial completion. I hope to be able to report that to you 2 weeks from tonight. So we really are at the end of the project with the central fire. On the financial reports, both are unchanged from 2 weeks ago. There's nothing new to report tonight, which means that we still have $271,240.72 in the uncommitted balance for the project. Just a reminder, as we've talked about before, we will have a committee meeting to address the potential uses of that for additional work at the two facilities, and we'll be back to you with the recommendation from the committee probably sometime in January on that. And speaking of January, we are proposing that the ribbon cutting and open house at the Central Fire Station be on Friday, January 19th, beginning at 3 p.m. with the ribbon cutting ceremony and then an open house continuing into the evening. So we'd like the Select Board to give us a formal endorsement of going ahead and publishing that to the public and planning for that event on January 19th.
Did everyone sound good?
Great.
Yes.
Okay.
I won't be there. No, I might not be.
Then we're definitely doing it.
I
Great.
will be.
You're still mad about the third floor.
I'm still mad about Station 2.
Any questions?
Well, yeah, does anyone on the board have any questions about that report? Does anyone in the public have any questions or comments about the police fire facility update? I guess we're
When
done.
are we?
Right. Oh,
When are we going to have that? Our last committee meeting, or
In January.
In January.
Yep, we'll coordinate among the members of the committee and find a time. We wanted to get all the way finished with the
Right.
basic construction so that we knew what was left in the fund
Yep. Good.
before having those decisions.
Okay.
Thank you.
next up on the agenda is a letter to the Vermont Agency of Transportation about safety improvements on Putney Road, and this is a letter that's been requested by the Traffic Safety Committee. The town manager will explain to us what it's all about.
Sure. I'll briefly summarize what's before you, and then I think that Tim Whistle might want to add perspective since he's the Select Board liaison to the Traffic Safety Committee. Back in the summer, we asked VTrans to conduct a road safety audit for the portion of Putney Road that's between Veterans Bridge and Noah's Lane. Noah's Lane is the one that's up by the print shop, and it's the road that goes down to the by Sunel Auto Park. And the reason that those were the boundaries of that particular piece is because of the very significant amount of walking that goes on the hill there coming up from the bridge along what we not so affectionately refer to as the goat path along the west side of the roadway there, and increasing concern throughout the community and expressed repeatedly at Traffic Safety Committee meeting about the impact of NECA opening up there and some of the other uses in that part of Putney Road that are increasing the amount of walkers in an area where the infrastructure isn't really set up for it. So that was the catalyst to asking for this, but we knew that there were other concerns as well about visibility through that area and the change in the elevation and the change in the curve there. And so it's a tough spot in terms of the mix of vehicles and pedestrians and bicyclists. VTrans was very responsive to that request and did send a team down here, and we did a thorough site analysis there, and they wrote it all up. They did a very thorough job of analyzing the risks in that area and some things that can be done about it. But most of what they recommended for follow-up action is either action that will be taken when the larger scale improvement is done by VTrans through that corridor and all the way up to exit 3 in the 2024 to 2026 timeframe, which is still 7 to 9 years away. Or in some cases, they did identify things that could be done sooner, but under grant funding programs where the town has to be the applicant and the main sponsor of a project and then get state funding assistance to assist with that. We're very familiar with those. Those are important programs for our state. We've accomplished a lot of good infrastructure work in Brattleboro using those programs. We know that a lot else has been done elsewhere. But we also know that it takes years. That's not an expedited kind of project. That's years to do the planning that's necessary and then get the approval for the grant and the permits and all, and then actually construct the improvement. Our concern is that with the timeline that is normal for that kind of a project, we're only expediting by a couple of years compared to the 7 to 9 years before the big improvement would come about. So any of that means still several more years before there would be increased safety in the corridor. Because of that, the Traffic Safety Committee asked that we bring this letter to you and ask the Select Board to write to, or authorize that I write to Joe Flynn, who's the Secretary of VTrans, to ask for some very specific improvements in a variety of different ways, not only in that segment where the road safety audit was conducted, but further north at the Hannaford intersection as well, where we're requesting that there be the signalized intersection be changed to actually create a walk movement, some crosswalks and a walk movement in the cycle there, similar to how it works on Main Street. So that's what's before you. I know that Tim has some things he'd like to add to that, and we'd ask you to approve the letter so we can send it tomorrow.
Well, that was a pretty good summary. I just wanted to add that it was a great meeting because we had a lot of members of the public and we had a lot of your staff throwing in some really good ideas about how to solve this. It's a difficult area because not only do we not really have jurisdiction over this area, but we have this ledge on the eastern side, if you know the stretch, and then a drop-off ledge on the western side. But I think, actually it was Rod Francis that came up with the guardrail idea. We went back and forth after a while. I was suggesting maybe Jersey barriers would work, but then Hannah pointed out that that would be difficult for snow removal. So there's all kinds of obstacles, but so I think this is a pretty good initiative to write this letter. I was going to suggest possibly one change, but I don't want to micromanage. I don't know if that's acceptable.
Please. Yeah.
I was going to maybe suggest that we start the letter with the overt thanking them of the very quick response they did with the traffic safety study, because that was a very quick turnaround and they were very responsive. So just kind of massage the ego a little bit more and then just go ahead and pretty much keep it intact. But I would start it off with thanking them for conducting the road safety audit for a portion of the roadway earlier this year. So I don't know if you want me to attempt to rewrite it right now, but
Yeah, that's up to the board. I think wordsmithing in this setting can get difficult, but
We
Tim,
trust you guys to.
and he mentioned that comment to me before the meeting. I think it's a really good point
Yes.
that we don't want to start off with what we're complaining about when in fact we were grateful that they attended to this so quickly in the summer. So I think it's a great suggestion, and if the board were to approve the letter just directing that change be made, we'll get the wording right.
Yeah. Makes sense.
You want a motion?
Would you like to make one?
Sure. Thank you. I move we approve the letter to the Vermont Agency of Transportation Secretary Joe Flynn as presented.
Or as amended?
Yeah,
Or as
with the
amended.
suggestions
Yeah.
recommended by Tim. Does that sound
With the
good?
suggestion recommended by Tim. I was counting the number of accidents on the pictures when you made the recommendation. I apologize. Which is like more than half of the accidents happen in that stretch.
Does anyone on the board have any comments about the letter? Does anyone in the public have any comments about the letter we're going to send? Yes, Terry, please come up.
Hi, Terry Carter. I like the letter, and just for the record, I just want to emphasize the visibility part. A certain marginalized group that even myself rarely talk about are the people that live in the motels, but also live in town but work like at Dunkin' Donuts and places like that. And after 11, they have no transportation. And one example is one night when I was heading home, it was like around 11 o'clock, and just around Hannaford's, I saw this older woman walking very slowly towards town, and the visibility was poor. And I pulled up, and she was thrilled that I offered her a ride. She had just finished a 10-hour shift at Dunkin' Donuts and had been standing for 10 hours. And at 11 o'clock, at night in the dark. She was walking home to Elliott Street. So the emphasis, I think, on visibility. And as we know, people, particularly in the winter, will live up in the motels just past the exit 3 roundabout. And again, when there's no public transportation, they often walk at night when there's snow and other obstructions. So just for the record, and thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Does anyone else have any comments about the letter? All right, all in favor of the motion to send the letter to Agency of Transportation Secretary Joe Flynn, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? Motion carries 5-0. And we'll get the letter out. All right, the main issue or conversation we're going to have tonight is about the proposed replacement of the aerial ladder truck. And I don't know who's going to be the chief and the deputy chief.
I'll make just a couple of quick framing comments, and then the details will be provided by the chief and the assistant chief. So I just want to remind, I guess mainly the public who may not be as well informed, I know the board is aware of this, but I want to make sure that we ground our conversation tonight in the fact that we're proposing what we know to be a very significant expense for the taxpayers. Largest single expense for any one item, certainly in this year's capital program. It had been proposed in our originally submitted budget as $1 million to buy a replacement aerial ladder truck. As you've seen in the backup materials for tonight's meeting, some additional work by the department has identified estimated savings of about $50,000 off of that. We believe that we can buy a truck that'll meet the needs of the department for $950,000. So we propose that for your consideration this evening in as much detail as you'd like to go into, and then for your decision making as part of this year's budget process, we would propose that the $950,000 purchase be authorized, and that the funding for that be $450,000 from the unassigned general fund balance and $500,000 borrowed on a 10-year note, which would result in approximately $60,000 a year cost to the budget for the next 10 years. The basis for that is the essential need for this equipment and the fact that even though earlier this year when our 26-year-old aerial ladder was failing, we were able to replace that with a 24-year-old piece of equipment in better condition. The one that has just recently gone into service is still 24 years old. We need to be concerned that if you decide, because of this purchase earlier this year of the truck from Sharon, Massachusetts, if you decide based on that we don't need to proceed with the purchase of the new truck this year, as I've said before, we just want to remind you that that doesn't relieve us of the necessity of doing it in the very near future. So our suggestion would be that if you don't feel that we need to proceed with the purchase for this fiscal year's budget, that we agree on a plan that sets aside a portion of the funding for the purchase, and that we be making an expectation that we would be making that purchase next year when the truck that's in service will be 25 years old. And it takes a year from the time that the order is placed until the new truck is in service. So we would know that the current vehicle would be at least 26 years old before we'd have a new one in service. So with that as sort of framing it, unless you have a question for me, I'd like the department to present the details of the request.
Yeah, and what I just want to say, though, before it, and maybe I wasn't paying attention, we do not have to make this decision tonight.
You do not have to make this decision tonight.
We can make this in the context of the larger budget.
Exactly right. So as with all the other budget decisions, there are things that at points along the way in the process you feel ready to make, and then in many cases you want to take a deep dive and understand very fully a complicated matter, and then save the actual decision on that until you're making the set of decisions in January.
I just wanted to make sure
that's correct,
that we're all on the same page.
There's no pressure to make the decision tonight.
Right.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay.
Welcome.
Thank you. Good evening. Peter pretty well framed it pretty well. As just to reiterate and review a little bit, our 91 ladder truck was taken out of service in August due to safety concerns that the cost of repairs pretty much exceeded the value of the truck. In our investigation of what we were going to do, what we could do to keep an aerial in this town, we were lucky enough to find this used aerial from Sharon, Mass, which worked out. The timing was perfect, and we purchased that truck as what we call a bridge to purchasing a new aerial. That pretty well summed up how we got here. Other than if we rewind the clock one year, if you all remember, this ladder truck that has been taken out of service was in the capital budget for replacement last year. We went for a grant through the FEMA Assistance to Firefighters grant with some money set aside in the capital as the match. We were unsuccessful getting that grant, and so that's kind of set us back a year, or did set us back a year. So it was always planned to be in this budget, and unfortunately it came too quick that we took it out of service. To talk a little bit about our maintenance program, I know we've had some issues with vehicles in the last couple of years. We recognize that. I think that just to go over the memo a little bit, we operate and maintain 5 large and very complex vehicles. They're complicated pieces of apparatus. Just in quick summary, those vehicles, when they go out, they get washed every day. They get washed, the underneath get flushed the best we can in the winter. They're maintained on a regular basis with a certified truck repair shop. And they also are tested every year to meet NFPA standards. Because of these problems, there's a couple of more steps that we've taken recently, one of them being that we did start to oil undercoat the vehicles once a year. And we've also built in-house what we call undercarriage washers, which we found actually on the internet, where the trucks can back over these washers under high pressure, and it flushes the undercarriage and gets the salt and the dirt and the grime out from underneath a lot better than we can by flushing them. One of the things that we have found, and I was hoping that Steve Barrett could be here, is the new salt that's being used has brine in it. Though they don't use it locally, they use it on the interstates. We're being told by people that are familiar with this, along with truck manufacturers, that when this stuff gets up in the undercarriage on top of the fuel tanks and the frames, that it really clings to things. And believe it or not, we're being told that it's actually bad to drive or back a cold truck into a warm atmosphere, into the fire station, because it makes this stuff react with the metal and it rots it out. So that's why we're trying to take these extra steps to prevent what we're facing, which is the rust that we've had on the frames and the undercarriages and stuff. But I do want to reiterate, the ladder truck issues were not because of maintenance, it was because of age. There was nothing that we were going to do to head off what we faced with the ladder truck. It was a steel aerial that it corroded over time. And after a 27-year-old vehicle, the torque box underneath, the torque box is where everything comes together that attaches the ladder, the aerial itself, and all of the components to the frame. They were afraid that once they got into that torque box and started to inspect things, that they were going to find things that we didn't want to know about. So that's, I just want to make it very clear that it was not maintenance issues that took this ladder out of service. There was nothing that we were going to be able to do to stop what happened to these rungs and to the ladder itself. We have bought used this time. I would caution that they not become a practice. We were very lucky to find this aerial this time around because of the dealer we were talking to. And again, it was perfect timing. It was a moment in time that we were talking to the right person that had the right contacts that knew this ladder was coming in. And it's not, this ladder that we have now, though it's in much better shape than what we gave up. This isn't a guarantee. Also, it's not the perfect truck, or I shouldn't put it that way. It's not something that we would go out and buy because it doesn't have all of the options that we would get on a truck. It doesn't have a water tank. It doesn't have a pump. And things like that would be very hard to find on a used market. We would never find a truck probably that would meet exactly what we would spec out for this town. The town manager, so this used truck, we look at it right now as a temporary fix to what could have been and was a big problem to us. I know that as a fire chief, it makes me very nervous not to have an aerial in this town with the construction that we have, the Main Street we have, the Victorian buildings that we have. And this is actually my opportunity to thank the town of Putney. They gave us theirs. We parked their aerial in our fire station for about a month until we could get this used one in service, and very, very generous gesture on their part. The town manager spoke about funding, and truly that's not something we get involved in. That would be the finance department, the town manager to do it the way they see best. One of the things I think that I would say as I come toward the end of what I have to say is that I'd ask you to consider this request, as you think about it in the following weeks, as you finalize the budget. And I don't have a better way to say this, and then I ask you what there is to gain by not funding this aerial this year. And I say that because by delaying the purchase, think about the following points. If it's not approved this year, it again will back us up another year. It'll be in front of you again at this time next year. Fire apparatus is consistently increasing about 3% a year, if not more. And so that equates to about $28,500 on our $950,000 request. So we will be pretty close back to that $1 million that we've tried to get away from. We'll also lose value in the aerial that we have now, whether we sell it or trade it in. I do know that already communities are asking us around us what we're going to do with this truck when we're done with it. Buying fire apparatus is not the same as buying your family car. We can't go to the lot and pick one that we would like to buy. Keep in mind that there's a 1-year build-out time on aerials. A delay of 1 year in the budget means a delay of 1 year for delivery. So if this is pushed out another year, that's almost 2.5 years before we get this truck. It's a little bit risky considering that we don't know what type of service we're going to get out of this used vehicle because we just got it. And it, we're rolling the dice with this truck. The other thing that I'd ask you to consider is pushing out this purchase will have a domino effect on the rest of our capital budget. Right on the heels of the ladder, in the capital budget is a 1993 engine that we've talked about over the past 3 years as we've been addressing the capital budget. This engine has rusted water tank supports, and to be quite honest, I get nervous every time we use it. And I'm afraid the water tank is going to come out of it or we're going to break a tank support. And again, the truck value is not worth fixing it. So we try to get it to the end of life. And I also think it's time to realize that, especially with the larger apparatus, that we can't, with fire apparatus, we can't run it until they die, because it leaves us with this gap in fire protection and community safety. We wouldn't be in front of you unless, as your fire administration, we didn't feel that this purchase was necessary. We realize the expense, and we realize the burden on the tax payers with this amount of money. But we certainly feel that it's a very necessary purchase for the town, and we feel it's necessary to try to move forward and do it this year. Any more to add to that?
I just, on used apparatus, I did some research on some used trucks, and when I was doing it, I found some a few aerial ladders that were 10 to 15 years old, and then I found them that were 20 to 25 years old. And talking to different salesmen, I was asking why we were getting these ladder trucks that are 10 or 15 years old, and after talking to a few of them, it's basically those trucks are a department's lemon that they needed to get rid of, and they got rid of, and now this wholesaler's trying to sell the vehicle. And then once you get beyond the 20-year mark, most 20-year fire trucks you look at, they're at the end of their life, and we're just asking for trouble to buy it. I just want to reiterate that we were fortunate to have Putney's truck that they let us use. If we weren't that fortunate, the average, we would have had to have gone out to rent a vehicle to have protection in town, and that would have been around a $5,000 bill a month to rent a vehicle. And as the chief has stated, the truck that we just got from Sharon, Mass. Is 24 years old. Ours was 26. We didn't see these issues coming. Could there be a lift cylinder issue on this truck or a torque box issue? We don't know, but this truck is low on miles and hours, but unfortunately the reason that is this department didn't run the vehicle the way they could because they didn't have the staffing to do so. But what's going to happen when we start running this thing day in and day out? It's 24 years old. Are we going to run into bigger issues? And as Chief Picossi stated, the 24-year-old truck was bought to get us to the point where we can purchase a new one, and we've been talking about it for the last year or so, and we keep kicking the can down the road, and it is a lot of money, but the public safety and the firefighter safety is important to know that the vehicle's going to be there when we need it and not break down because we're running it till the end, beyond its end of its life. So I hope you give that consideration, and thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone on the board have any questions or comments?
I do.
I don't want to go first.
I will then.
Oh, Tim's going.
Oh, Tim's going.
Tim's decided to go.
I don't have to
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
Just a couple of clarifications. I thought I understood everything until did you say that the new truck does have a water truck? Not the new truck. The newer to us used truck that we just acquired, does that have a water tank?
No.
Okay.
It doesn't have a water tank or a pump,
Right.
which
Which
we
the
spec
newer-
our trucks with, yes.
Okay. Because I thought you said you were worried about a water tank, so then I got confused. Which was
The
that a
truck,
different?
okay. Sorry.
Okay.
I kind of mixed two trucks together. The truck that is in the capital budget to be replaced right on the heels of the aerial ladder has water tank support issues.
Okay. Okay. Great. Great. How often do you need a water tank? I recognize that the newer trucks do have one, and that would be great when you don't have connection to water, correct? How often, what's the percentage, just off the top of your head, of how often that happens?
With the engines, 100%. We start all operations off our water tank until the second or third truck can get there and lay a line from a hydrant to supply the water.
I see. Okay.
Is it 100% with the aerial truck?
The aerial truck always, I shouldn't say always, 99.9% of the time is accompanied by an engine.
Oh, right.
However, the good thing about having a pump in a water tank on the aerial is that it can be self-sufficient, and in a very busy period, for example, a bad storm comes through town and we've got everything out and running, we can actually run the aerial as an engine because it does have the water tank, the pump, and hose on it.
Yeah, definitely see the advantage.
I think my last question would be the grant that wasn't successful. Is there another opportunity for that?
There is, and we talked about it. We don't know when it's going to come out again. It comes out annually. So probably we won't see that grant again come out until late spring. The problem with that grant is that it's a competition grant that's nationwide. They take a certain amount of money. I wish I could tell you right now what the president has in his budget for this grant for this coming year, but I don't. But going back to last year when we applied, there was only $17 million only nationwide for vehicles, and we were asking for $1 million of it. The chances were very slim, and from what I can gather, we did rather well with the peer review and everything. But it's just that they break the money up into pots for different uses, and apparatus is not a big piece of that pot, and so chances are really small.
Okay. I sort of have summary thoughts, but why don't I just see who else has other questions?
Yeah, I'd really rather we got the grant.
I hear you.
We would too.
I hear you.
But we didn't, and I read what you wrote, and I wish you weren't such a good writer. So I think my only question at this point is, or that my request would be that between now and when we make all these decisions, that you look for ways to get the loan part of it down. I mean, we could sell our new used truck and cover some of it, but I just hate we're trying to retire all these loans and bonds and not borrow anymore. And we just, between the sewer and the police fire project, we've borrowed a lot of money. It's a lot of debt service, and there's just some way to reduce that $500,000. Just ask you to look, to really dig in for that. Lenny's got
to follow up on that. We have figured out the loan part of it. Plus, we've also provided what they call a lease purchase program, which you can do 5, 7, 10, or 12 years, which you can basically, they come up with the amount that you pay each year. So you could, for instance, you could pay $90,000. For the next 10 years, you're going to pay $90,000.
Right, instead of 60.
Instead of
15,
right. I get what you're saying. It's a lot of money. That's one way to try to lessen the burden, but you're spreading out the
debt service.
Pain, yeah.
So that's it.
Anyone else have any questions, comments?
Go ahead.
I'm not going to ask any questions really. But, for me, it's a safety issue. I also was very disappointed when the grant fell through, as I know that everybody was, because it's just so much money. I can't, I'm not going to sleep well wondering if there's a building fire on Main Street. I mean, now I'm scared about the pumper truck. Just like, you know, like the water tank fall out. I'm like, oh my God, this is not acceptable. I know it's a little.
Yeah,
but
and I might have been a little bit strong with that, but I just want you folks to know that it is coming.
it's not your fault. I draw
Yeah.
very good visuals,
And,
so I terrify myself easily. So for me, it's a public safety issue, much like a government budget. It's not like a household budget. Owning public safety vehicles is not like running your Honda Civic. You know, I ran my Honda Civic 210,000 miles, and the gas tank fell out, and the brakes died in the driveway at the same time, right at Joe Jewett's house. And it was a point of pride for me that I really killed that
And I'm
thing.
sure it was for Joe.
I would rather not do that with the fire truck, you know, not the same. So, yeah.
And we really didn't expect this to end this way.
Well, yeah.
It was
Nobody does.
religiously. It went through all the NFPA inspections every year, and there was some hidden things that were found in the maintenance of it.
Well, can I ask one question before
Sure.
you get started? This is
my
more,
God.
this is a point of more curiosity. That you said that communities are asking about what we're going to do with a Sharon vehicle. Like, do other people, why do they want it? Or, I mean, if I'm basically like, if they want it, why don't we want it? Is basically my question.
Smaller towns
Okay.
that would take it out 5 times a year.
Okay.
You know, that type of an inquiry.
Okay.
That it wouldn't get used or dependent on the way it is here.
Okay. Okay. All right, John. Now you can.
John's turn.
Let's get down to this, fellas. Okay? I love you guys, you know that. And this is not, it's nothing personal, it's just money. So I have a bunch of questions. So how often does the ladder truck go out, roughly? And don't build it up either, just give me a good answer.
I'm on an average once a day.
The ladder truck goes out once a day on a call.
Yes.
The ladder truck responds to any reported fire or smoke in a building. The ladder truck goes to any automatic alarm that's tied into our municipal fire alarm system. And
Okay, let me
So it's on average.
rephrase it then.
Sure.
How often is the ladder truck used? Because it's obviously, it doesn't get used every time it goes out.
right,
So-
absolutely.
So, I mean, so,
Sometimes, very hard question, John, very hard. More often in the winter, obviously, than in the summer, because of chimney fires, because of plug chimneys, because of furnace issues, because the majority of our building fires are in the winter.
3 times a month, 4?
On average, probably, a
Okay.
couple times a month, yeah.
I always have a problem with this, with equipment. And I know that we bit ourselves in the ass about this when we put things off, and we shouldn't be. But we can only afford so much. I mean, that's the bottom line here. And I, we're all trying to be nice here, but it comes down to is money. It comes down to whether we can afford this and whether we're doing our due diligence on making these things last as long as we can. And I know you guys do a great job, but I hate it when we always say, well, it's an old truck. I've got an old car, still runs great. I don't think we can always go by the age of a vehicle. And this is what gets thrown up a lot. Oh, it's a 24-year-old vehicle. It could be a 24-year-old vehicle that's in great shape. I don't want to use that for the catalyst to buy a vehicle. So I don't want to keep using that. We found a used vehicle. And again, I don't want to set the precedence of buying used vehicles. But in the people that I've talked to, and it could happen every year that we could buy a used vehicle and get a great deal. $35,000 for a ladder truck is phenomenal. even if it got up to 100,000 for a used vehicle. That's still phenomenal. That's not $1 million. $1 million for us at this point, with our debt service, with everything else that we're carrying, I can't see it. I can't see it when we have a fairly good vehicle for $35,000. I was all set to say, let's fix the ladders for $80,000. Let's because the truck basically is in good shape. Am I correct on that? It's the ladder apparatus and all the.
We weren't going to get it back unless they tore it apart. And
right.
When they tore it apart,
they could have found other things. Exactly.
And I know you don't like to refer to vehicles by their age, but obviously fire apparatus isn't going to have a lot of mileage on it.
Right.
It's going to be the age and the use. And, you know, there's no better way of putting it than that truck is 27 years old, and when you use a fire truck, whether it's once a day or once a month or once a year, it gets used hard. Not that they're abused, but they get used. They work hard.
Oh,
you know,
I'm
you
sure
figure
they do.
that ladder truck's at.
For $1 million, they should work hard.
Yeah,
they should work really hard.
The ladder truck worked at the welder block for 14 straight hours.
Yep.
It worked at the Brooks house for 20 straight hours. It was the last truck to leave the scene. We kept it there for almost 2 days. That ladder truck, because it was reliable, because it was there, because we could run it on a first alarm, the way, you know, you asked, when do we run it? Well, that fire came in on an automatic alarm. A.C. Howard was working that night. He was the shift captain. That ladder truck was the saving grace for 4 of my people that came off the 5th floor down over the aerial when there was a back out. And I don't want to have to rely on something that we don't know if it's going to work right when people's lives are at stake. And I know that you don't like that either, because it doesn't happen all that often in this town, and I'll give that to you. But it's like having car insurance. When we need it, we need it. And it's a life safety issue.
I totally agree with that. I totally agree. But I don't want to be made to feel pressure about, you can get a brand new piece of equipment and it could fail.
Sure.
You know, so I don't want that scare tactic to be used about.
And I don't mean it to be a scare. I don't mean it to be that
I know,
way.
I know, but
trying to set an example of. We're tasked with protecting lives and property. We need reliable equipment to do that, and that's what we're sitting here asking for. Is I totally understand it's a lot of money. It's a lot of money, and I was appointed chief almost 11 years ago now. I dreaded the day I needed to sit in front of the board and ask to replace this truck. I really did, because I understand it's $1 million, but it's a necessity in this town.
I'm not saying it's not a necessity, but for 3 times a month, we're guessing, you know, and the fact that we have a ladder truck that doesn't meet all your specs and your bells and whistles is a very good truck. Is a very good ladder truck. And I just can't see saying, well, we're just using it for a stopgap. I would say, and again, I'm not trying to micromanage your job or anything, but I would love a Tesla. I can't afford a Tesla. You know, I'm going to run my truck until it dies, and then I'll try to hopefully get another one.
Can I stop you there for a minute, John?
Yeah.
We can't run fire trucks till they die.
No, you can't. I know that. Right.
You're kind of, well, you say you get it, but you're saying that we should run them until they die. And
well, I'm saying that there's a little bit more life in them, and I think we should research that before we step out and buy $1 million ladder truck. That's what I'm saying. I'm saying that this $32,000 truck, use it. I mean, I don't want it to be as a stopgap. I want it to be, if it's good enough to get another year out of it, let's get another year out of it. That's all I'm saying. We're overtaxing this town like crazy. And, you know, with the bonds that we have out now we've got new fire stations, new police stations, we've got a new sewer treatment plant. These are big nuts that this town has had to deal with. And on the backs of all this, to ask for $1 million ladder truck at this point,
I want to go back to your first comment when you started talking about is, we've postponed trucks. We've just tried to think that we're saving money. That tactic, unfortunately, doesn't work. You've pushed vehicles off, and you've really not saved the taxpayers money. You've cost them more money. And to me, by keep pushing this current truck that we have is 24 years old. Well, you're saying let's push it 2 or 3 more years down the road. You're not really saving the taxpayers money. You're going to end up costing them more money because of something. For instance, a 24-year-old truck has a radiator in it. If the radiator blows in your car, you put the hood up, take the radiator out. If the radiator blows in this 24-year-old ladder truck, you're going to take the entire cab off the truck to get to the motor to get the radiator out. Think of the man hours that it takes to do that, then start working on what's actually wrong with it. So you have to look at it at that kind of thinking, rather than it's not a car that you can just pop the hood open and take fix it.
Well, with any kind of vehicle like that, it's anything like that is unexpected. You don't expect it to break down. And it's going to break down when you need it. But it's still. I'm having a hard time with budgeting this one. And that's where I'm at. I don't know if anybody else has any other comments, but.
May I ask a question?
Oh, yeah.
Anticipating that you don't plan to make a decision about this tonight, is there any information that the board needs from staff before you do make a decision when you're weighing this in the final decision making in January, or do you have all the information you need and you just recognize that you've got more thinking to do?
I'd like to know, I agree with most of what you say, John. The only reason I don't go along with you completely is that I think this is, because it's not just 1 year, it's 2 years. Because if we put it off a year, then it takes a year to build it. And it is an old vehicle, and we can get, maybe we can sell it for 30 grand and pay off some of it. But mostly it's because we've got a pretty significant reserve fund at this point, and we can put off, we can avoid borrowing right now, and we might not be in that situation in a year or two. And so, I think we should go ahead with it. I would like to see us, as I said, see if we can find some more cash to put into it. And there are other things we're going to be looking at as we go forward. And there may be some savings that we can find in some of the other capital things or other. I'm going to want to move 99 grand over for the pool deck. So, I'd love to have this $1 million so we could do that. But it's always balance. It's always shifting.
Oh, it always is.
And
right.
sharing. And I think unless there's some really serious or really important services or resources that we're not going to be able to get because we're going to spend it on this truck, I think we should get the truck now. Not necessarily just because we can, but we pay for half of it cash, and that's a lot of money over 10 years.
But since I've been on the board, our unassigned fund balance has always increased. I mean, it's just, so I can't say that 3-4 years down the road, we're still not going to have that option. I think
we can save it and take a year and save another 100 grand.
Yeah, I think we are going to have that option. So, again, I'm not negating the safety end of this. It's just too much at this time.
I think in the big picture is we do need to understand the finances of it. And we might not, and I think what David said is, we have to figure out what the options are and how much to put in, how much to borrow, how much to use from the surplus, whether we do it now or we do it next year, what are all of those things look like? And to me, even when we look at that and we're looking at it in the big picture, we may have more questions. Do you know what I mean? Because there's a lot of moving parts here where we keep talking about using the surplus for this, that, and the other thing, and we really haven't looked at how much we're using. Do you see what I mean? In the grander scheme of things right now.
In the proposed budget, we were
Well, we
very
have it
clear
pretty much
about
clear.
actually proposing to use so much that we would draw down to 9.4%
Right, but-
instead of adhering to the 10% standard.
Right, but what I'm saying is, there's all these other moving pieces coming around, and it's, do we increase taxes to do this stuff, or do we
Right.
use the surplus to do this stuff? Do you see
And
what I'm saying?
Absolutely. So that's where the evening of the 19th is so important, because when we take stock of where are we at that point, we will have talked about a lot of things. A few of those things are going to result in some savings, but most of them are going to result in increased cost beyond just what we proposed. And
Which
what we
happens
proposed
every
was going to be
year.
a 3.5% increase.
Right.
So we'll be very clear to you on the 19th about where we stand, and it will provide the foundation for the additional discussions and the final decisions that you're going to make in January. And they're not going to be easy this year.
And that's what I'm saying is this, what we ask now, which is, for some more clarity on the numbers, we might ask for even different information once we have the big picture of everything. So
Sure.
right now, we don't know how this all fits together and what it all adds up to be.
Understood. But for now, as we look ahead to January, what I'm hearing is both questions about what does it look like this year versus next year, and what does it look like if there's a different mix of cash and borrowing.
Right.
Right. Okay.
Does that help, John? Just-
We can
Well,
link it
yeah,
both.
no, I want to see it all, but just one thing that just came to me. I mean, we also just came off the back of having to buy a new backup pumper, right?
Yes, we combined an engine and a rescue.
Right. I mean, right on the heels of that also.
But again, that's the product of delaying these purchases.
Yeah. That's why we get
And that's,
Exactly.
though we tried for that grant last year, we didn't really delay the purchase of this ladder truck, but it was delayed a year because we weren't successful with the grant. So it prolongs it another year. And now if it's kicked out another year, we're looking at 2.5 years before we actually take delivery of this truck. And that concerns me.
Right. Well, and I talked with this about, to Peter about this, and I also think we should have a better way of analyzing or assessing the equipment that we have, and not maybe just depend on one person's how they looked at the vehicle. And I think we should get 2 or 3 opinions on a vehicle and find out how much it's going to cost to get something fixed, instead of just going, oh yeah, it's old, it's dead, let's just get a new vehicle.
That was done with this ladder truck.
Okay.
When it was tested, we were told that the cables were no good, that we had a leaking lift cylinder, and that's why it was where it was at to be fixed. And they confirmed both of those, and that's why the budget was upped for this year, for the maintenance budget, to repair that stuff, and they found this other stuff. So 2 of the major problems were confirmed by 2 independent truck manufacturers, I guess I would.
Can I ask, so the Sharon truck, you have pretty good confidence in it, right? Otherwise, you wouldn't have brought it before us to purchase.
So as I put in the memo, on the surface, the truck looks really solid. Again, you don't know what the torque box looks like. You don't know, as Assistant Chief Howard mentioned, the interior of the radiator. Is there problems? The body is solid. We don't see any weeping lift cylinders, so there's no hydraulic fluid that's leaking anywhere. It seems to run very, very good. All of the stuff, and we took 2 mechanics with us when we went and looked at it, and they went over every inch of that truck. So the stuff that we knew about, like an exhaust issue and some other minor stuff, we had repaired when we took delivery of the truck. How do I say, the moving pieces, I guess, we just don't know.
I'd like to add something to that from a management perspective, and I think from the policy perspective of how we need to make decisions when we're weighing these things. So there's we need some knowledge of that level of detail, but we're generally looking at things from a broader perspective of other departments' needs and what we can afford and so on. And to me, what made the Sharon opportunity so compelling was not anything related to the particular details of that truck, but was the fact that we were faced at that moment with investing somewhere between $60,000 and $100,000 in our 26-year-old, nearly finished ladder truck versus $35,000 to get something we knew was 2 years younger and more roadworthy. It almost didn't matter how much more roadworthy. It was a vehicle in better shape for a third the cost. So at that moment, that decision was a pretty easy decision.
That's a no-brainer.
But since we've, at the night that you authorized that, and as we've been talking about this budget, we've been really clear to say that bought us the time to keep protecting the community and think fully through this decision. It didn't take the pressure of needing to make this decision off of us.
Oh, and I wasn't suggesting it was. In fact, my question was just the start of this thought I wanted to get out, was that you wouldn't have brought that truck to us if you had inspected it and thought, this is not even a stopgap.
Right.
So I think I'm landing somewhere between these two gentlemen in that this is definitely a stopgap. But the question is, how big is that gap that we're stopping? So I'm a little bit between really wanting our fantastic personnel, and I have personal experience with your department, and I have friends who have experience with your department, and I have full faith in you guys. And I think I can speak for all of us up here that we really appreciate everything. And again, it's not personal, but I think our job is to try to figure out that in-between point where our citizens do not have an unlimited amount of money to pay their taxes. We really have to find that sweet spot where we can have up-to-the-date, good equipment that is also fiscally responsible for our town. So where I'm currently landing, I know we're not making a decision, and that's for the best, I think. But I do like that earmark portion that we have from the capital surplus, and think about the idea of having a layaway program going forward. I personally would not support kicking this out any more than 2 years, which I'm adding the year for, or 2.5, I'm not sure about that math, but I'm adding the year for the construction. So that's where I'm landing right now, is that I would really love to see all or a portion of that earmarked, with the hopes that maybe even we'll have another surplus that we can also put forward. And we don't have to even, in the best scheme of things, we wouldn't even have to borrow for this new truck. You never know how it's going to go next year. But I'm really landing on that and enjoying the idea of earmarking that for our ladder truck, but not necessarily making the purchase this year.
This is, being on the select board is kind of funny. All the stuff through the beginning of the year, right after March, it's easy. It's just, we got this, we got that. This is where it gets tough. Sure. And it happens every year. Every year we go through the same thing with budget. What can we afford? What can't we afford? Everybody
what are we going
wants,
to do without?
What can we do without? What can we not do without? Everybody wants something, and it's hard, But for me, I really just have to look at the working poor out there that are just getting by right now around here, and it's. I just hope my house doesn't catch on fire in the next 3 months.
Like I said, this is a very hard request for us because it is such a big ticket item, and that's what makes it hard. But obviously, we wouldn't be sitting here if we didn't feel as though
Exactly.
it was a concern of ours. We can't sit here and tell you that this new ladder truck is going to last, like you say, a year, 2 years, 1 day, 1 week. We don't know.
You don't.
And that makes me nervous. And that's why I'm sitting here today asking you to approve this request.
And there's no counter to any of the arguments in the
None.
letter. You're absolutely right. There's no question. There's $1 million. What else? What else we do?
Do you have enough info? Do you, like what we want?
Yes.
In 1 year, 2
Actually,
year?
that last part of the conversation was really helpful because it positions us to be able to bring you some additional information for the next time that hopefully will help you get there.
Okay. Do we have any last questions for our
Nope.
fire department?
Uh-oh.
Oh, yes, Franz, I'm
The finance
sorry.
committee.
Oh, that finance committee.
Oh, this is going to be good.
Franz Reichsman from the Finance Committee. May not be the appropriate time, but I just want to say that the Finance Committee wants its budget doubled for the coming year.
Was our budget doubled or your?
I want everybody's budget
I think he
doubled.
was talking about the fire
So,
department.
no.
Good way to
seriously.
start, Franz.
First of all, thank you, gentlemen, for coming and making the request and being very clear about what it is you need. I learned one potentially important piece of new information, which is that a ladder truck can be rented for, well, I won't take this as gospel, but say $5,000 a month.
Years.
If for $1 million, you could rent that truck for 16 years and 8 months, which isn't that far off the expected lifespan of the truck. I'm not suggesting that we rent a ladder truck, but I am saying that I don't think, if that's the case, we wouldn't find ourselves in a position where we don't have a ladder truck if there's one that we can rent. So I think, the doomsday scenario can be pushed back a little bit. If our beautiful Sharon truck dies tomorrow or a year from now or 2 years from now, it seems to me none of us would allow that to put people's lives and property in danger if there's one that we could somehow obtain on a short-term basis at not a huge premium in price either. So it just struck me that maybe a bunch of these different points of view can somehow be melded together. Thank you.
That's our goal too.
Does anyone else have any questions or comments about the ladder truck? Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
We'll make a decision.
Lenny, you still love me? Attaboy.
All right. With nothing else on the agenda, would someone like to make a motion to adjourn?
That's it?
So good.
You're kidding.
Now that's
No, we have a motion to adjourn. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone
There wasn't even
opposed?
any correspondence or committee.
Nothing.
5-0.
I could
We are
find another
adjourned.
meeting to go to. I still have all this.
Thank you.
Wow.
How about duos?
Thanks for coming.
Can we reconvene?
Yeah, I think that's.
That one's not
Thanks.
warned.